As a designer, we have to keep on creating just for fun in order to keep our minds engaged and sharpened in our skills. In this video, I want to keep on sharing work that I've done just for fun. And I believe I mentioned this in one of my early videos, but I have a whole bunch of tool posters that I designed, and I'm going to save that for its own video because there's a lot to go through. That'll be the next and last just for fun video I do, so definitely keep an eye out for that. Before we get started, please make sure you are subscribed to support the channel. Alright, I do a lot of music related designs, and this is one of my favorite albums from the 90s. It's a little bit lesser known. It's called Retreat from the Sun by the band That Dog. If you're a fan of 90s alternative rock, definitely give this album a listen. It's really good. But you can actually see a little bit behind the scenes of the framework on how I did this. So I started with an eye graphic here. I actually didn't design the eye. I think I found it somewhere online. I just wanted something that was kind of like a little bit more line art for the eye. Then I created these shapes right here for the top and the bottom. And then I used an envelope distort of the text inside of those shapes, and then that produced this right over here. The poster itself actually follows the color palette from the album, so that's what I used here. It's been a long time since I've done this one, and at the time that I was doing this, I was doing a lot of envelope distort stuff. I really enjoy that, and maybe I'll do some more for the channel. Here's another typographic lyrics poster. This is one that I did for the Beatles, and yes, this is all 13 studio albums from the Beatles, starting with, well, she was just 17, and you know what I mean. Great song there, and all of those lyrics to every single one of their songs, going all the way through their discography and ending with thanks Mo, on behalf of the group, I hope we pass the audition. As I've talked about in the past, this is one of my favorite projects to do because it brings so much technicality into design, and I really enjoy stuff like that. And I haven't gotten all of the posters like this that I've done printed out, but I have seen this one printed out, and I love how they look when they're printed. And here's one that I recreated for their appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. I did get this one printed out, and I gave it to my parents. They're enormous Beatles fans. Anything at all music related, but especially vintage style concert posters, I love doing stuff like this. All right, here's one that I did for my dad. One of his favorite movies is The Day the Earth Stood Still. My dad watched this movie when he was a kid, and then he and I watched it together when I was a kid, so this is a really special movie for us. There's a speech at the end of the movie given by the main character, so that's what this speech is, and then I did an illustration of the ship itself. I surprised him with this for his birthday one year, and he's had it in his office ever since. Alright, next up is a happy accident. If you've never seen the movie The Glass House from 2001, it's actually a very underrated movie in my opinion. It came out during a time where you had all these teenage slasher movies and everything, but this one actually is a decent story, although it's a little bit melodramatic at times. But it is really good overall, and I think it deserves better recognition. But this is something that I did. I just took an image from, I believe, the DVD cover or something like that. Could have been a promotional shot. I don't remember exactly. But all I did with it was just a live trace, and I just love how this turned out. It just looks so cool. And after I did the trace, I did a couple of things where I kind of removed a few little artifacts here and there, but for the most part, I left it exactly as it is. I could definitely see taking this a little bit further and kind of making a vintage style horror movie poster out of it. That's not really my style, so I don't know if I'd necessarily do that, but I could easily see it working for that type of concept. All right, this right here is titled The Perfect Saturday. This is one of the very first typographic posters I ever did. It was inspired by something that I saw on DeviantArt, like probably in 2010 or something. And it's just a very simple type layout of all the different shows that I watched on Nickelodeon on Saturday mornings. And the color palette that I used was actually inspired by those friendship bracelets from the 90s. Remember all those super bright neon colors? That's what these are. And then I added in a neon blue, which I think works really well in this group. And then a few years later, I did an updated version of actual neon lettering right here. So we've got like a neon effect going on the wall. It's been a long time since I've looked at this, but I think this turned out really cool looking. All right, one of my favorite movies of all time, probably in my top 5, is The Prestige. And the last time I was watching it, I took a picture of this flyer and I said, I've got to recreate this thing. So I worked on it. It's not entirely completely finished, but it's one of those things that I kind of did and then walked away from. So I need to come back to it and really refine it exactly the way it looks in the movie, but I would love to get this printed out. This was a lot of fun to work on. And then here's another one that I did for The Prestige. It says, "Are you watching closely?" And of course, it's meant to look like one of those eye charts that you see at the eye doctor. If you've never seen The Prestige, definitely watch it. It's one of my favorite movies. All right, here's a poster I did for the movie The Ring. It's meant to look exactly like an old VHS tape. So I created each one of these individual elements, and I did a couple of little nods here to the movie itself. But this one was a lot of fun to do, especially this gradient sphere right here. That was fun to recreate. Okay, one of my favorite bands of all time is definitely the Sundays. I would say they're probably number 2 or number 3, really, really high up there. And they made 3 albums and then disappeared off the planet. And all 3 albums are perfect 10s. They don't have a single bad song. And so you can see the artwork showing through the lyrics right here, and I actually use their official typeface that's in their logo. So going all the way to the end of their albums, this is definitely one of my favorite bands. If you've never listened to the Sundays, definitely give them a shot. And one more thing for the Sundays, this is inspired by their song Summertime, where they use an up-close image of a ladybug. And so I was watching the music video where they use a ladybug, and I just had this vision to represent the song in minimalist design, so that's what I did. And I just love how this one turned out. All right, here's an 8-bit poster that I did for the movie The Wizard. This one was a lot of fun to do. If you want me to show you how to do something like this, let me know down in the comments below. But it's meant to look like those old NES games, and the process of doing this is actually really cool. And to see it go through those stages as you're doing it, it's just so satisfying when you get to the end and see the final result. All right, I'm a really big fan of the Titanic, not just the movie, but the ship itself. And so I found a really low resolution of an original ad from the Titanic from 1912. And so I brought it into Illustrator, recreated it, and added some effects to make it look aged. And I just love how it turned out. I love how all of the different areas here are kind of blurry in some areas. This was actually before I learned some of the techniques that I'm using now, so the text is looking a little bit too sharp for this. If I were to redo this now, I would definitely make it look like the ink was more burned into the paper. All right, here's a poster that I had up on my Etsy shop for a little while until it just wasn't selling anymore. And the source of this is rollingstone.com, so we're just going through all the different albums here that are in the top 100. This layout was inspired by another infographics poster that I found, I think on Pinterest. And this one was a lot of fun to put together. And then I had somebody reach out to me and ask me to make one for the 90s, so I did that one as well. And as you can see, there's a little bit of a difference in the color palette. I used colors that were a lot more prominent in the 90s, so things like pastels and aquas, things like that. I love putting together infographics. They just take forever to put together. Here's an idea that I had for my favorite Tori Amos album, Scarlet's Walk. The whole theme of this album is a character traveling across the United States post September 11th, and I've always loved the concept of the album, and I love the album itself. So I had this idea of kind of making a map, and all of the song titles are all these landmarks and everything. I could definitely go in and add a few more things to this to make it a little bit more refined. Plus, it would be cool to finalize it and then add some textures to it to actually make it look really old. Maybe I'll come back to it eventually. This is something that's not an original work. This is actually a magazine ad, but I recreated it in vector format. And at one time, I actually had it hanging up on my wall. It looked really cool above my CDs. And I'm pretty sure that I designed the CD itself to be actual full scale. So I could have taken an actual CD and put it directly on top of this. I may actually do that again. All right, the very first album I ever bought with my own money was the Blue Album by Weezer. And so I had this idea a few years ago to do this dot treatment on the album cover. And I love how this turned out. And it's so cool that you can instantly recognize it, especially if you know the album. When I saw them last year, I was gonna have this made into a t-shirt, but I ended up wearing this t-shirt instead. This is one of my favorite t-shirts of all time. If it's too loud, turn it down. Definitely a contender for one of the best band shirts of all time. All right, it's probably been over a decade since I've opened up this file, and you can also tell that it's old because Frosty cups are no longer yellow. But this was one of the very earliest things that I ever traced in Illustrator, just using the pen tool. I don't even think that I used the brush tool at this time. But I wanted to do like a simple minimalist poster design for a Frosty. And even with something as simple as this, will teach you a ton about Illustrator and how paths work, especially considering this. Let's switch over to outline view. And you can see how we have that path going behind there, and then the Frosty covering up that path. It took me forever to figure out how to do that. But I did, and here it is, and it's been forever since I've opened this file. All right, here's one for all of you Keenan and Kel classic Nickelodeon fans out there. Who loves orange soda from Keenan and Kel? I did this one close to 10 years ago, and I just love the bubbles on this. I actually had this made into a t-shirt several years ago. It's been a while since I've worn it, but anytime that I wear it, I always get comments on it. All right, here's the design that I put together. It was kind of meant to be a poster, but also kind of a playbill at the same time. It was for the greatest show I've ever seen, and that was the Smashing Pumpkins on the Shiny and Oh So Bright tour. That show was amazing. They played for over 3.5 hours, and they played just about everything that you would want to hear from the Pumpkins. And so I put together what was supposed to be a playbill, and it actually has the set list of everything that they did for that show. And number 18 was very special. I never thought I would hear Porcelina of the Vast Oceans live. So this was an amazing show, and I wanted to make something for it. All right, and the very last thing that we'll talk about is something that I put together a few years ago when I was posting a lot on Instagram. There were a lot of designers that were doing very minimalist versions of well-known logos, so I figured I'd try my hand at it, and it's just a black part of the X overlaid on top of the white part of the X, but it does have a very slight shadow right here, and I think that just adds so much to it. It would be cool if Xerox took this design, just saying. I hope you found this video inspirational. If you did, please leave a like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.